Let's dive straight into a rather striking intellectual inversion presented in the Averaging Up collection. Today, we're going to rigorously analyze capital allocation, specifically looking at the architecture of growth and moats. The concepts will explore fundamentally reframe how the market evaluates the cost of scaling an enterprise, and frankly, why our basic instincts about efficiency might just be entirely wrong.
The primary objective of the article we're exploring is to directly challenge a prevailing orthodoxy in modern investment thought. For the longest time, the dominant belief has simply been that capital-light businesses, those that scale with minimal reinvestment, are universally superior to their capital-intensive counterparts. Well, today, we're going to rigorously test that assumption. We'll reveal exactly why that judgment is, at best, incomplete.
To really grasp this, the article establishes a foundational equation for business architecture. Think of it this way. Every business contains two fundamental forces. First, you have A, the toll. This is the physical cash a business collects today just from the ongoing, everyday activity of the world. Then there's B. B is the wave. It represents the structural cost required to grow tomorrow. And what truly separates ordinary businesses from the extraordinary ones? It's the cost of that B.
This naturally leads us to a clear comparison of the two distinct kinds of tolls operating in the world. On the left, we have the light toll. The framework terms this the Freesurfer. Think of companies like Visa or MSCI. Their growth arrives at zero marginal cost. They essentially collect a fraction of every transaction or passive asset without pouring a single yard of concrete or laying new roads. Their growth is, for all intents and purposes, free. Now, on the right, we have the heavy toll. These businesses are built from concrete and steel. National railways, airports, utilities, aircraft engine franchises like GE Aerospace. Their B is highly mechanical. It has to be paid for with enormous capital requirements. Now, the initial instinct is to always prefer the free growth of the light toll, right? But as we'll see, that instinct misses a highly critical dimension of market reality.
And this brings us to a profound inversion. For the light toll, the moat, whether it's an entrenched network effect or some regulatory embed, exists simply to protect that free growth. It keeps the imitators out, so the toll remains uncontested. But for the heavy toll, the dynamic flips entirely. The enormous capital requirement to grow isn't a structural flaw at all. In fact, it serves as the moat itself. The very expense that previously looked like a severe weakness is precisely the thing that guarantees the monopoly. Let's ground this concept in a very specific physical reality. Consider a national railway network. Absolutely no competitor is going to step forward and spend $80 billion to build a second national railway right next to an existing one. Why? Because two railways would simply split the existing freight traffic. As a result, neither would earn its cost of capital. The sheer expense inherently repels competition. The cost of B literally becomes the moat itself. Suddenly, massive expense is no longer a liability, it is an impenetrable defense. Now, we do need to introduce a crucial caveat here. Capital intensity is not automatically a virtue. Not at all. It functions as a moat only when it creates a protected, consolidated oligopoly that reliably earns returns above the cost of capital, just like our railway example. But if capital intensity exists in a fragmented, highly interchangeable industry, take the airline sector for instance, it is absolutely not a moat. In that specific context, it's a perpetually value-destroying trap. So we're looking at identical capital intensity, but with completely opposite economic outcomes. So if heavy tolls require such vast amounts of capital, who exactly are they built for? Well, the answer lies in the constraint of scale. Warren Buffett established a foundational principle regarding the burden of a massive portfolio when he famously noted, "A fat wallet is the enemy of superior investment results." An individual investor almost never feels this constraint, but the giant allocator, they feel it constantly. This resulting dilemma is what the article outlines as the reinvestment problem. Pure compounding machines, those capital-light Freesurfers we discussed earlier, return an absolute torrent of cash, precisely because their free growth requires almost none of it. But for a massive institution, that return cash actually presents a severe problem. It creates a relentless wave of capital that urgently needs to find a home in a global market featuring a rapidly shrinking universe of destinations large enough to absorb it. We can see the pure arithmetic of scale clearly highlighted in what's known as the MSCI paradox. The purest Freesurfer in the framework is, ironically, entirely too small for the truly great allocator. If a fund managing $77 billion attempts to strategically deploy $10 billion into a highly efficient light toll like MSCI, it hits a mathematical wall. The allocator would end up owning the entire company and still have billions in cash left over. The stark irony here is that the light toll's absolute capital efficiency renders it effectively useless as a destination for massive size. So the crucial takeaway here is the absorption solution. For the fat wallet, a heavy toll's unique capacity to safely swallow billions of dollars at a dependable, regulated return isn't just a secondary trait. It's not a necessary evil. It is the entire point of the exercise. A business large enough to absorb capital that literally has nowhere else to go becomes a rare structural necessity.
We can actually see this theory ground itself in recent market reality by looking at Berkshire Hathaway. They made a massive $10 billion commitment to Alphabet, precisely as Alphabet formally announced a staggering $190 billion commitment to build the highly capital-heavy infrastructure of artificial intelligence. Think about that. Berkshire bought into a heavy toll being aggressively built right beside Alphabet's capital-light search toll. The giant wallet deliberately seeks a toll large enough to hold it.
We observe a very parallel strategic maneuver when examining Chris Hohn's portfolio balance. Managing an enormous sum of capital, his strategy actively utilizes both architectures simultaneously. He aggressively funds his enormous heavy toll positions, assets like GE Aerospace and Canadian Railways. Concurrently, he notably cut his Microsoft allocation from 10% of his portfolio down to just 1%. Why? Specifically to fund his position in Alphabet's heavy infrastructure build. He clearly recognizes that holding both architectures allows him to compound immense capital behind physical walls that simply cannot be scaled by competitors.
The ultimate conclusion derived from the averaging up collection is striking. In the realm of capital allocation, there is no universal, single best business architecture in the abstract. There just isn't. There is only the best architecture for the specific size and scale of the capital you carry.
We can systematically contrast these two realities. The lean wallet finds its ideal state in the light toll. It compounds freely, enjoys highly certain growth, receives modest cash returns, and can effortlessly redeploy them. The posture is highly advantageous. You're basically paid to do nothing. Conversely, the fat wallet operates under the absolute necessity to deploy billions. For the giant, capital has nowhere else to go. It must be deployed behind the massive protective capital wall of a heavy toll. It is driven purely by structural necessity. Ultimately, these two tolls are not rivals. They are sophisticated answers to different questions posed by investors of drastically different sizes. Both correctly collect a toll while the world performs its daily activity. As you look at your own portfolio, the only relevant question remaining is, exactly which toll can your capital fit through? This content is educational and reflects a personal analytical framework. It does not constitute investment advice. Visit averagingup.com to explore the full collection.